So Monday morning, I guess June the 2nd, and here we are doing another Q&A session. This time I have McLaughlin on, who is a performance coach based in Portland, Oregon, and someone I've had the chance to meet in person since moving out to the Pacific Northwest. And what a tremendous person to have access to in this region of the country. So I initially developed an interest in Mark's work through just seeing what he was posting online, and it resonated with me so much, especially looking at the way he's monitoring his athletes in addition to the way he approaches athletic development and just sort of working through the ages with an athlete. So I just wanted to thank you for taking the time, Mark. We have two bald guys on here this morning. Looks like we got the light right. So,
and the powder. Thanks, man. It's a pleasure to be on here with you. This will be fun.
And I was joking with you a little bit. It looks like you're in some mad scientist lab.
Right.
So
right.
We'll
my beer lab. My beer lab.
Yeah, it definitely could pass for that. So I wanted to just start by having you tell viewers sort of how you became a performance coach and who some of the most influential people were during that journey.
So I had always been involved in athletics throughout my whole life, and was fortunate enough to be able to play basketball and baseball a little bit in college. And then from college, I started, wanting to become a high-level recreational endurance athlete. So from the time I was 5 till now at 51, athletics has always been a big part of my life. And when I was in high school and college, like the worst injuries I saw were like a sprained ankle. So, all these, ACL injuries and dead arms in baseball and, more high-level catastrophic injuries that happen now, I just didn't see. And as I got older and had a real job that actually paid me money, reading the newspapers, I started to see a trend in the local athletes here in track and field that were having catastrophic injuries. So a broken femur with a cross-country runner who actually broke her femur in the final 200 meters of the state meet. Arguably the best 400-meter runner in the state had a torn hip flexor as a freshman. And then for the next 3 years had extremely bad hamstring issues. And then 3 girls from one school had anemia. And I'm like, okay, there's something wrong within the training. And so I just started doing research on the injury rates nationally with athletes, between the ages of 6 and 18. And it's like 1 in 10 out of like 38 million. So, you're talking 3.8 million that are injured annually. So I'm like, okay, there's an issue. How can I move forward with trying to allow these athletes to reach their full potential? So then I started doing research, and then I started applying the training first on myself. And then I had success there. And then from there, I volunteered at my high school for 3 years and worked with the football team and had big success there, not only on the strength and speed and all that, but on the reduction of injury. So then at that point, I'm like, okay, now I can move forward and open my own facility. And so at that time, my biggest influences at the beginning, were people like, Louis Simmons from Westside, Buddy Morris and Tom Myslinski, who at the time were at the Cleveland Browns. So just kind of reading how these guys were, programming athletes. And then from there, it's evolved. The more the more resources you get, and then you kind of start honing it down from there. So now, the people that, influence me the most are Val Nasedkin, who worked at Omega Wave, who was a huge influence in the monitoring, and then taking that monitoring and being able to apply it to try to get the the adaptations. Some other people that actually work in the industry. So Landon Evans from University of Iowa, who, you know, just the way that he looks at training and the way that he just kind of goes about the nutritional side and the performance side has just kind of pushed me to think in other areas. So, I mean, that's kind of a snapshot on how I got involved, and, you know, up to this point, kind of, you know, some of the, you know, bigger people that have been impacted my career.
Well, that's interesting. And I mean, to your point, I was one of those athletes who maybe I had some abilities coming up through the ranks, but I was constantly getting injured. And it was a combination of inadequate nutrition, overtraining, and just not really respecting the limits of my body and affording the recovery that I needed. And one of the things that you definitely see with people who make it to very elite levels of performance is there's never any lapses in training. And you can really get someone to reach that peak, provided that you protect them along the way. And, you know, it's great to hear how you sort of came to be a performance coach. So you, at the end of that question, you were saying you start getting into monitoring a little bit, and that's something that I started developing an interest in after seeing some of the stuff that you were posting online with regards to the Omega Wave. And can you discuss how you incorporate monitoring in your work with athletes, and what some of the pillars of your approach to doing so are? Because you seem to have a very simple approach.
Yeah, so when I actually started my own facility, I needed some type of assessment that would embody my, you know, mission of protecting the health and well-being of the athlete while improving their performance. So I think you see coaches who say they care about the athlete, but then what types of processes do they have in place that actually embody that? And so at the beginning, I'm like, okay, I need something that a tool that I can do that with. And so when I met with Val from Omega Wave back in 2003 and saw that, you know, in as little as, you know, 4 minutes, we could have, you know, heart rate variability, we could have the readiness of the cardiac system, of the central nervous system, and then the metabolic system, I'm like, okay, this is kind of a no-brainer, because in order to allow these athletes to reach their full potential, you have to understand on a daily basis how ready they are. And so not just from a cardiac standpoint or a nervous system standpoint, but then moving it within the training itself. So, you know, one of the other things that we do is we monitor speed. So, you know, we have the free lap timing system now. And if athletes aren't running between, you know, 95 to 100% of their best, then the session needs to be stopped. So then you have drop-off points there. You know, then you can use, you know, the Tendo unit or even a power meter within like endurance training on, say, a bike, to determine, okay, yes, all of these systems early on were good, but maybe they have some muscular soreness from previous workouts or a lack of nutrition that has not allowed them to recover. So that they push the heavy power, say that they need to on a, say, a heavy interval session. So you need checkpoints even throughout the workout when you're doing the work to see if the outputs are where you need to be to allow the proper training effect. So that's why, in my opinion, you shouldn't be guessing on what you're trying to do. You need checkpoints throughout the whole workout to determine if you're getting the right training effect. And I think that's been one of the biggest breakthroughs in allowing the athletes to achieve their top level performance. And then the other thing is being consistent with the monitoring. So no matter what type of system you have, whether you're managing just heart rates or power output or omega wave or iAthlete or whatever, it needs to be consistent, because you just can't take a one-up test and say, okay, I'm going to base everything off of just testing somebody once a month. Because again, then you're still guessing again.
You get pushback from your athletes sometimes, and they're saying like, Mark, I feel like I'm ready to go. And you're saying, well, the data indicates otherwise. How do you reconcile that? Do you just sort of, take executive authority and say, look, today we need to just dial it back or shut it down?
I mean, that's a great question, Chris. And part with the way that I think about training is building that culture within our system. So the science part of it, they're exposed to like immediately when they come in the door with that initial assessment. So A, we're upfront with what we're trying to accomplish. B, they see the higher level athletes, if they start when they're younger, they see these guys being monitored all the time. They see the results that they're getting. They see performance on the field. So at the beginning, they're seeing actually what's going on. B, sometimes using not high readiness levels to say, okay, let's go train how we had it scheduled today and see how you perform. So you make that a learning time for them to say, okay, it's showing you're not super. Let's see how you perform, say within some testing, whether it be speed or jumping or, weights or whatever. So then they begin to feel and get feedback so they can understand what feels really good and what doesn't feel good. And most of the time when I say, okay, you typically run a 1.5, say in the 10, and you're running a 1.8, you've got to feel the difference. Or you're only jumping, 85% of your best vertical jump. So that's part of coaching. That's part of the learning process for them. So that's how you reconcile it. And then, yeah, there are times when I'm like, we are not going to train hard today. That's just the way it is. And you can't get better when you're injured and on the sidelines and visiting someone like yourself who's a physical therapist. I don't want to have a professional relationship with you with my athletes. I won't
take that the wrong way.
Yeah, no, I just don't want them going to doctors or PTs all the time, especially when they're 15, 16 years old. There's no reason. I'd rather go have a beer or coffee with you and talk about, the fun stuff that we do talk about when I'm up there in Seattle. So that's kind of how we So here's this past.
Are you still with me, Mark?